get your.
No, I'm leaving. They told me to
Play home. Is it something I almost said?
Okay.
We're starting the beginning of the Maimer Lech Lecha.
First Maimer Lech Lecha.
Okay. So it's actually very interesting. I'm definitely not an evening person, and this is my proverbial bedtime for me. I mean, I don't actually go to sleep at 8, but my brain goes to sleep at 8. And I'm sitting over here, and there's cholent and there's beer and there's all kinds of different things. And if you pile them all on top of each other, for me, Shabbos, like Shabbos day, half hour after the cholent, I'm out cold. This is pretty much the best way to put my brain to sleep fully. So, in case you're wondering why I cannot eat cholent right now, wouldn't work. But it's actually interesting on another level, because if you look at Avram, which this parsha is mainly about, and actually every day of this week's parsha is about Avram. Avram started off life as Avram, as this, and we're going to see in the beginning of the Maimer, the Alter Rebbe says that Avram, he was so high up, he was on such a lofty level that he was completely above it all. He was essentially floating above. And in this Maimer, the Alter Rebbe discusses the journey of Avram, the Lech Lecha, what it also means. It also means that he had to go out there and connect to the world. And that's why the cholent actually makes a lot of sense, because in order to really break through the layers, you have to first go down a little bit. It's actually an interesting thing that I heard that Alter Rebbe said. Alter Rebbe used to, and this is incidentally quite interesting. Most of you probably know this, but Torah and Likutei Torah, that it's split into two different parts, and you can say that this one just starts from Vayikra, and this one goes until there. But really, there's a much bigger difference between Torah and Likutei Torah, because Torah is really the way the Alter Rebbe spoke to his inner circle, and they're much more difficult. Likutei Torah, you have the Tzemach Tzedek helping it out and helping us understand. So on many levels, it's much easier to understand. And many of the Maimarim in Torah are extremely difficult to understand just by looking at them. And so the Alter Rebbe once went to one of the Chadarim. It used to be called the Chadarim, like the people that were allowed to go into the inner chamber by the Alter Rebbe. And he went to one of the chambers and he spoke. He asked some of the Chassidim. He said, "Do you know what Avram?" I'm having a brain freeze here. He basically wanted to say, it's like, how is it possible that Avram was Mekayim the whole Torah before it was given? And nowadays, obviously, in Tanya and in various different places, we see explanations that he had Ruach HaKodesh, so all the others had Ruach HaKodesh. But at that particular moment, he gave a different explanation. And he said that the Baal Shem Tov once wanted his Chassidim to understand something. So he took his Chassidim and he sent them out to a pub to watch some drunk people communicating with each other. And he says there was these two drunkards that were talking to each other. And one says to the other one, he says, "I love you," like a drunk person would say. And then the other person says, "No, you don't." He says, "What do you mean I don't?" He says, "If you would love me, and you would know what hurts me." And it's a very powerful, obviously, it's a Baal Shem Tov story, but and Alter Rebbe said that was Avram. Avram had such a deep love for the Eibishter that he inherently knew what the Eibishter wanted him to do, because he just connected on that level. And it's also, if you look at the name Avram, like Av is let's not get too Kabbalistic with cholent and beer at night, but Av is the idea of Chochmah Shabbat, and then Ram is even higher, and it's Seichel Hanela Mikol Rayim, which is basically the idea that Avram was on a level where essentially he did not exist on his own at all. He was purely an extension of the Eibishter. He was a pure love of the Eibishter, and that means whatever the Eibishter wanted in this world, and whatever the Eibishter wanted from any person, Avram inherently felt it, and that's how he was Mekayim. And in many ways, this is also, by the way, the idea of a Rebbe. Another little interesting nekuda is, they once did a handwriting analysis of the Alter Rebbe's handwriting, and the person that did the handwriting analysis, this happened in the 1960s, I believe. It's like the person that did the handwriting analysis completely had no idea whose handwriting he was analyzing, and he was just giving a report based on what he saw. And he gave this report about the Alter Rebbe that was like on the money. And the Rebbe actually was very impressed with the report that this person compiled. But one of the interesting things, all the Rabbeim over the years, all the handwritings were analyzed. And one of the things that all the Rabbeim had is this. One of the Tzad HaShavos is that they were all extremely grounded. They were very connected to the world. They were not aloof. And that's that power that the Rebbeim had always, and that a Rebbe has inherently, is that they feel Gashmis, they feel other people, they feel the needs of other people, and they're able to completely connect to that. But in this week's Parsha, and the Maimer, the Alter Rebbe really talks about what is the job of a person that's up there. What is the job of Avram, which is, he already is at the highest level that you can possibly be. Like what's Avram supposed to accomplish? And there he explains that the idea of Lech Lecha doesn't just mean go out there and go on this journey. It's like this is the journey of your life. This is what you have to do in your life to both complete the world and to complete yourself. So let's do a little bit inside. I'm going to probably not spend too much time on the first part of the Maimer. But let's. It says over here, it starts in parentheses, Inyan Lech Lecha vayelech lemasav mimata lamaylo, or mimaylo lemata. It's a journey from below to above and from above to below. This talks about physically all the journeys that Avraham Avinu went on, but also in Ruchnius. Lavai nirachulu, lavai sasam. Lavai stam. So he says, Hine, Avram hu seichel hanelo mikol rayan. Like we said before, Avram connotes the idea of the highest level of seichel, because Avram is really made up of two words. Av, we always know that Av is Chachma, because father is Chachma and Ima is Bina. But obviously when we're talking about Avram, he was the earliest example of a Yid. So he was Av. Av connotes the idea of Chachma in Atzilus, and Ram is Seichel Hanela Mikol Rayim. It says, his job is to take this really, really high level and bring it down into a Gilui in this world. The Hainu. What does this mean? Which is that level of Chachma that we're referring to, until you're going down all the way into this world. He says, the ultimate purpose is to bring that Giloi down into Bia, which is Bria Yetzir Asiyah, which is the actual world. And he says, Gan Eden Elyon v'Tachten. We know Gan Eden Elyon starts off in Olam HaBriya, but that's basically the beginning of Olam HaBriya. Then down until our world down here. He says, Tainuk HaNivroim sheyuchlu lekabel Gilui HaTainuk. His job is to take this level and make sure that everything, even on the lowest level of the world, has the ability to connect to this level of Tainuk. That's what Avram is supposed to do. He says, "V'zeu inyan chesed is gale b'puma de'ama." Without going into too much detail, this is talking about the bris. He says that that's where chesed is located. And begashmis, when a person has bris, they're branded forever. Because one of the ways that, for good or for bad, that people used to check if you're Jewish or not. It's like a bris is that you physically take a gashmistic thing and you change it. And that moment, and we know in Chassidus it's often discussed that until that moment there was no such thing as connecting anything from above to below. But that moment when Avram actually changed something on himself physically, that's when the physical world had the ability to start being affected. But he's saying that the chesed is located in that part of a person. And he says, "Liyos giluy hashpa bebechinas eskashrus, v'hu yoshev Pesach Oil," which is in next week's parsha when we're talking about Avram sitting on the entrance of his tent and allowing all kinds of different people to come in and to join. Okay, that's in a nutshell this journey. It says, "Ach giluy zeh hu al yedei tzimtzumim vehelem bebechinas choshech diyitzchak." He says, ultimately, the real way of accomplishing that is through the darkness of Yitzchak. So Avram in his entire life was not able to fully complete that journey yet. Why? Because Avram was chesed. Avram was chesed pure. In Chassidus, a lot of times it's discussed the idea that chesed is great, but it's dangerous. Because if you're a pure ish chesed, if all you have is great kindness, then you're susceptible to a lot of outside, a lot of influences. And then we have Gvura of Yitzchak, which is the opposite, and then we have Yaakov, which was Bechinas Teferes. But Avram was lacking Gvura still, and only once Yitzchak came into the world, that's when. And if you see Taka, Avram had already a child before he had his own bris. Who was his child before? It was Ishmael. And then when Avram did his own bris, that's when he was able to have Yitzchak, because that's when Avram connected the higher level of disconnectedness to his own body, and that's when it allowed for this new concept to be brought into this world, which is Yitzchak. Yitzchak is Gvura. It's a very interesting concept in general. I remember there's this. It says Ben Arboim Labina. I always said there's a lot of people that will argue that before 40 I can be very wise. What exactly happens? Why is it called Ben Arboim Labina? Some people become quite wise before they turn 40. And then when I turned 40, it hit me what it means. I realized that there's certain things in life that you experience as a theoretical thing. And at the end of the day, no matter how much theory, it is a very interesting concept. Computer modeling has gotten really, really good. Nowadays, you can almost test everything with a computer, right? You can, when they design a new plane today, or let's say Boeing wants to design, I shouldn't use Boeing, but let's say, actually Boeing is a perfect example for this. So Boeing has the ability to use 3D modeling and then put in all kinds of different mathematical calculations into the 3D modeling, and they can know what the plane will do in real life. So the question is, why, if that's the case, if you're able to do all that, why do you have to build 10 prototypes and then fly them and test them and put them through wind tunnels again? And it doesn't make any sense. If you're able to do it, it's the reality is that there's ein chacham kabbalah nisayon. There's no, there's always a disconnect between theoretical and reality. In order to test something, how it really is going to be in life, you have to first build a real prototype. So Avram was missing that. Avram was still above all that. Yitzchak was Gvura. Gvura is generally darkness. It's like, in order to really see light, you first have to see darkness. Before you see darkness, you maybe all be light, but you're going to be limited because you're never going to see what light means as opposed to darkness. You're only going to see, you're just going to live. So if you look in the Pasuk Tak, in the Bereshis, the next, we'll continue, it says, Vayihi erev vayiveka yom echad. By the way, it's a very, I was just thinking Corona, I don't know if everybody in this room, but most of us by now have experienced Corona, right? And a lot of people that live in Manhattan and in downtown Brooklyn, the idea is a completely foreign concept. It's like, no, don't even get near me. We felt it. So, but until you feel it, until you know what it feels like to have the muscle pains and everything else that comes along with it, it's a theoretical thing, and someone can explain it to you however well they want, but you're still going to be lacking. And until you actually experience it, but then once you do experience it, I was like, I know Corona. I felt it. I experienced it. And it's a completely different story at that moment. Even if you read everything you can possibly read about it, even if you read every medical journal, every study, you will always be lacking the actual experience. So he says, Avram was still lacking that experience. And that never changed until Yitzchak was born. So he says, if you look carefully in the beginning of Chumash, where it says that first it became evening, and then it became morning. Evening, chayshech, is darkness, and then light, and then Yom Echad. And it says, Kedei liyas bechinas yesh, vayir Yom Echad. So first there had to be a bechin of yesh. And it says, Amshachas echad, sheyir hayesh batal. And then you can have echad to be mevatel the yesh. The hainu sheyir bechinas yesh ubatal. In Chinuch, there's a very interesting concept. There's an idea of people that feel that you have to be mevatel yourself completely. You're not allowed to exist in the first place. That's what bittul means. And the idea of bittul, there's a very important nekuda in bittul, which is bittul means that you mevatel something. Bittul means that there was a yesh first. And what is that yesh that we talk to? It's like when you have a child in chinuch, the first thing is you have to let them live. You have to let them exist. He says if you never let your child truly exist and be a yesh, then they can never have bittul. Because bittul means that you first exist, and then there's a concept of bittul. And he's saying over here that and Mamash, he's saying the words over here. If you look carefully, he says that if you want bittul, there has to first be a yesh. Choshech is the ultimate yesh, where you have darkness, which is the whole idea of the obstruction of the world. And he says then you can have the bittul of Boker. But all right, he continues. He says, "Vehine liyois gilu zeh." In order to get to this gilu, tzarich liyos mitzvahs mila. It says for the Avram Avinu that meant that he had to make a bris. Lahasya arlo he klipas noiga hachifefes chulu shelo yir lo yanika. As long as there is a foreskin, as long as there is a klippa, there's still the possibility of there being a yanika sachitzainus. And he says, says you cannot get a pure gilui as long as the klippa is there. The only gilui you're going to get is what can get past that blockage. So he's saying that Avram had to do a physical action to open up the possibility that to truly open the gateway to the world and the gateway to humanity and the gateway for humanity to be changed. And that happened when he did the bris and when he cut off the arla. V'lochein, ksiv acha mitzvahs mila. What does it say after the mitzvah? Ki av hamoin goyim. At that possibility, at that moment, the possibility of Avram becoming. In which pasuk? It's in the pasuk where Avram gets an extra hay, and it says, now you can be the father of many nations, because now you're open to truly have a hashpah on the world around you. Ma inyan goyim lekan, like you would look at goyim as a negative thing, like that Avram is introducing this idea of bringing bad things into the world. Goyim is a various different nations. He says, "Elo, no." Says when we're talking about over here goyim, we're not talking about a bad thing. He says the goyim that we're referring to is over here. You're creating the possibility for an effect all the way to all the people around you. So just about now, the challenge should be kicking in. So should be kicking in.
If you were to have any, but you didn't have any.
You know, if I was a hypnotist, I would probably use this moment right now to just put you all to sleep. I'm baffled by the idea, but I'm telling you, you see it very clearly in this mimer that this is it. This is it. This cholent and the beer and the trulies and everything else, this is what opens up the possibility of breaking through barriers that are almost impossible
At
to
least
break.
2 or 3 plates. First plate. Not plates marken.
Yeah, it says, Kilama tzadikim daimim b'fnei Shechina. He says, Kener b'fnei avuka. Generally, when tzadikim in front of the Shechina are considered like a candlelight in front of a torch. What does that mean? What's the meaning of a candlelight in front of a torch? Does a candlelight matter in front of a torch? No. It says in front of a big flame, a little candlelight does not matter. And it's like the light is so powerful that it has the ability to encompass all of it. Any light that is, and you know, this can be explained in many different ways, but if you, let's say you're in a dark room and you're lighting a big flame, and then you light a little candle next to it, the candle is not going to be teifes makim. It's going to be completely swallowed up in this great flame, right? He says, "Va'amru galu le'edoim," and he says, when we're talking about that they were sent into Golus to Edom, ki loy galu elo kedeshi teisef aleim gerim. It's like the point of it there is, so when you're an avuka and you're this flame, this great torch, then you have the ability to affect and to essentially swallow up all these and bring gerim into your midst, because your flame will overpower them. Again, we're talking about Avram's purpose in the world, and Avram comes with this huge power, being Avram. It's like, if you bring this down, you are the living torch of the Eibishter. You're no blockage at all. So when you bring that light, you have the ability to affect all the people around you. Vehein hanitzeitzes shebeklipas noiga shebemacholin umashkin shemis'alin leskal bekedusha mipnei gilu yeshchino shal yedei zeh heim betelin v'nichlalim kener b'fnei avuka. It's like everything you touch, the beers, the trulies, the cholent, and everything else, you have the ability because of this, because you're coming from this great place of power, and because you're coming from this great place of bittul, of Avram, you have the ability to now affect everything around you and to truly, no pun intended, to actually affect the things around you. Yeah. Okay, and then he says, "V'zehu inyan parashazu." That is what the purpose is. Vayomer havaya el Avram. What did he say to him? Avram sheyehei yored umishtalshel bebechinas gilui kedei liyos tikun ubira. Says it's not enough for you. You know, before Avram lived, the world was pretty much divided between the good and the bad. Even though we know that by Chet Tzadas, the possibility of mixing good and bad was introduced to the world, but in reality, people tended to be either good people or bad people. And it's like like there was always the good and the bad. Avram's job was really to now start affecting so that things wouldn't have to be in a olam hatoyu anymore. It says, Avram until now it was all a mess. It was like there was no order, and there was no ability to truly affect the things around you. Deramabul, etc. Says Avram maschil olam hatikun, and then Avram introduced this idea that you can actually start fixing the things around you. He says Lech Lecha Yetzias Shem Ma Hametaken Umevar. To bring down the Shem Ma, which is, you know, Shem Ma, the Yud Kei Vav Kei is split into various different ways of spelling it. it's very interesting because I'm saying these things to you as if you don't know, and I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know all these things. But the reality is that I learned a lot of these things only lately in my life, and it's always interesting. Sometimes you don't know, and we come across these things so often. Shem ban, Shem ma, Shem ab, like all these. What is it? What are these shemes? And the truth is that they, without going into too much Kabbalistic things, there's different ways of spelling out Yud K Vav K. You can either spell it just as the simple Yud K Vav K, which is the numerical value of 26, and then Shem Ma is the numerical value of Mem He, which is 45. And how do you get to 45? Is when you spell it out as in Yud Vav Dalet is Yud, right, and etc. Hey Aleph, and that ends up the numerical value of Ma. And each way of spelling Yud Ke Vav Ke brings down a different hashpah into the world. So the Eibishter has different ways and different things that get affected by different ways of spelling, and each letter is concise.
It's different IP addresses.
Yeah. He says, "Tzricha liyas yerida acha yerida me'Avram b'chinas Yesod Abba ad el haaretz b'chinas Malchus." That was Avram had to go down from yerida to yerida until he was able to actually affect things through b'china of Malchus. It says, "Asher areka." What's Hashem telling him? The world that I'm going to show you, the places that I'm going to show you. Areka. It says, "Pirush ere ve'agala oischa b'atzmacha." And this is a very interesting oistaich over here. He's like, this journey is not just for you to affect the world. It is also for the world to affect you. And then you would wonder, why would you want the world to affect Avram? He was perfect. Why would you want him to be exposed? He was literally at the highest level that a human being can possibly be. And this introduces a very interesting concept. It's like, there's certain things that you can only affect once you touch the world the way it is, once you actually go out there. And when he says areka, he's like, I will show yourself to you. You will now get to know yourself in a completely different way. That's what he's saying. It's like areka is not just the world that I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you to yourself. There's claim you're going to become revealed to yourself with the mitzvah of Mila v'hoya shimcha Avram. Your name from now, Avraham. I'm sorry. Your name will now be Avraham Av Hamoin Goyim. Okay. So that's the general gist of the idea that this is your journey. Now, what happened? What actually happens when you introduce a hey into someone's name? How does that actually change someone? Why would that actually change his entire existence? What is in Chassidus? What is hey? What?
Bina.
It's pashtus.
Generally bina, right? Hey is generally bina. Why is hey bina?
It's pashtus.
Right. So al pi Kabbalah, how is a yud? Is there any sefer here? No. There's a yud, but the yud is chachma. Why is it called chachma? Yeah, because it's like a little dot. It's like, oh, I have a thought. Like that's chachma. It's a little thought. And the yud, on top of the yud, has like a little thing sticking up in the Sefer Torah, right? And on the bottom of the yud, there's a little thing sticking down. And what is that thing that's sticking up from the yud? Why is this so important? And by the way, it's really important that we do these things correctly, but a real yud has to have a thing sticking up. And what is that? That is the connection. What is chachma? Where does chachma come from? Where does a person get any new idea from?
Kesser.
Kesser.
That's right.
What's Kesser? I'm going to give you the most simplistic explanation of Kesser that you've ever heard. It's like if you go right now to England and you break into the museum Tower of London, is that where the museum is located? Where's the museum? The Crown Jewels.
Tower of London.
Tower of London. All right. So you go in there and you break into the thing and you put on the crown. Are you now king? So it's like, what is a crown? What is a kesser? It says the kesser is what this kingdom stands for. Like, what is the meaning of this, of everything? So kesser, Begashmi is this is the meaning of it all. The only time that the crown matters is if what it represents. and Keser is the representation of the actual Tainuk. So now you have Chachma, which is a new thought, but that's born from that idea. It has to come from the idea of Keser. So that's that little thing sticking up from the Yud. Then there's the Yud, the middle piece. That is Chachma. That is that Baruch HaMavrik, like, oh my God, great idea. And then there's like this little thing that pulls down on the side of the Yud. And it's like, that's the connection of Yud, of Chachma to Bina. And that little thing, string that comes down from the Yud, that starts the process of Bina, right? So it says, let's go in here for a second. Again, we're discussing essentially how does something come from above, and why is the Hey in Avraham such an important element of changing Avram's entire existence? He says, "Vehine, lefi zeh hi yerida, liya is me'Avram Avraham." He says it doesn't make any sense initially when you look at it. It's like it's a yerida. You're introducing the world into Avram. It sounds like you're going downwards. You're not going upwards. And it's like Hashem is giving Avram this great gift. I'm now adding in Bina, which is way lower than where you are. So it doesn't make sense that it's even a gift to add this hey in. He says, Mashen etaisiv loy hey. He says, who hey law? It's like he brought in this hey law, which is the beginning of Bina. Of Vizaya Isa Gabe Va'avad Halevi Hu Do Atika. What's Atik? Atik, there's the Keser is split into two parts. There's Atik and there's Arich. The best way to remember the difference between Atik and Arich is Atik is the attic. Atik is the attic of Keser, which is like the deep inner meaning of what this crown truly represents. Arich is actually the way that the crown extends itself, and what that goes into Chachma and into Bina. But the idea that we're talking about over here, the Hey Elah, and he says Va'avad Halevi who is which is Bina. It's a little Kabbalistic. So he says Do Atika. This represents the idea of Atik. She's Galus Atik hu bebina dafka v'loy bechachma. He's saying that Bina actually has a mila over Chachma. How is that possible?
Seichel is understood.
Why?
Because Chachma, you don't have any comprehension of it. But when you get the Bina, you understand the Indian.
Okay, true, but Chachma has the ability at that moment to still to go into various different stages of Bina, right? Like an idea can manifest itself in many different ways. Okay. So in theory, once you go down into Bina, once you already start thinking about details, you're no longer connected to the idea itself, and you're now on a lower level because Chachma represents possibilities and Bina represents limitation. No?
Okay.
So what makes Bina greater than Chachma?
You're able to bring it to a Zulas. As long as it's a Chachma, so it's within yourself, so you're really not appreciating the full the whole. You know what I'm saying? The contribution of the Chachma, because it's in yourself, so you haven't really understood it completely. It's but when you start expounding, you're already bringing it out to a Zulas. So now it's a practical level. You bring them to a practical application.
Okay, that's true. Now all these answers are correct, by the way. However, what we're talking about over here is the fact that Bina has the ability to completely obscure Chachma. Why? Because a person can sometimes get so deeply lost in his thought that they lose their connection to what the beginning of that thought was, and it can completely detach. And if something has the ability to overpower something else, that means that it has to have a mila over it. Because if it wouldn't have something that this didn't have, then it wouldn't have the ability to do that. As simple as that. He's saying that the Bina has to come from a place that is higher than Chachma, otherwise it could never obscure Chachma. So now, what does this mean by Gashmias? So we said over here that there's Keser, which comes down into Chachma, and then it goes into Bina. Bina is the ultimate revelation of Tainuk. And this goes, by the way, into what you were saying before. Because did you ever see one of these people, a deep thinker, and they're like, shh, no. Like, and as soon as someone even says one word,
they give a bubble.
It's because it's still this tiny little nekuda. It's still in chachma, and you don't have the ability to have any sort of distraction, because as soon as you have any distraction, that disappears. So chachma is in a very fragile state. Bina, Bina is when the fragility expands, and then you have the ability to. Another thing, who has the ability to teach little kids? Is it a dumb person or is it a smart person? If you want to give over a great idea, like a very high idea to people that are not on that level, so you have to be a smarter person or closer to them? No. It says in order to give over an idea to someone else that is not on your level, you need to have such a great comprehension of the idea
you can dumb it down.
That you can dumb it down. And who was the ultimate example of that in history? Shlomo Melech. What does it say about Shlomo? Actually, he's going to bring it down over here, that Shlomo Melech had the ability to put everything into 3,000 mashal. It's like, he's like, really? That's your greatness? That you can tell a lot of different little stories? No, the greatness is that the idea never lost its essence. And the only way that the idea doesn't lose its essence, no matter how much you dilute it, that's because you are directly connected to this idea and you have a deep understanding that goes beyond being able to easily be destroyed. So he says that is Bina. Bina, that ability, what is actually the avodah of Bina? What's the avodah? What are you supposed to do? In Chassidus it says that there's avodah, there's Chachma, Bina, Das, right? We have Chabad. Chachma, Bina, Das. Like, what is Bina? What are we supposed to be doing? So there's an actual thing. The thing is, we're supposed to take the little nekuda of Chachma, and we're supposed to, it says in Tanya, it says it everywhere, it says you have to Reichav, Eirech, Eimek. What are the different things? What are those different ideas? Reichav means you broaden the idea. Physically means you broaden the idea. And it's like, how do you broaden an idea? You think, oh wow, really, this also applies to this, and this also, like you're expanding, you're physically expanding the idea. And then what happens if you expand the idea? Then you think about all the different thinking you did, and it gives you an oimek. It gives you an understanding of the depth of the nekuda of the idea, and you now understand it so well because you took it into so many different directions that you now truly grasp the idea, and that's called oimek. And then once you have oimek, there's the avodah of oirech. What's oirech? Oirech is that you're lengthening the idea. What does it mean? You're lengthening the idea? That you now have the ability to give it over to people that are way far away from you, like little children or people that are much, much lower. So Bina has an avodah, and it's talked about. So this is various different points. There's oirech, reichav, oimek. That's what happens in Bina. And he says that's what the avodah is. And that power that Bina has to be that comes actually from a higher point than Chachma. And that's what we're going to be talking about over here, that Avram was still missing this, because Av, ultimately, even though he was Avram, he was still living in Av, which is Chachma. So just to go back in over here, to one, a few more minutes. Okay. I have to say, I'm very impressed with you people. I mean, I would be sleeping soundly over here.
I put a lot of pepper in it. So.
You did? Pepper does it? Really? Is that the trick? No, I have to tell my wife. Says, so he says, is that where we're up to?
Yeah,
okay, so we basically said that Atik, which is Tainuk, Atik, which is the crown, that is the true Tainuk of the Eibishter, that is revealed in Bina. That's where it actually gets a chance to be revealed. So it's like Chachma nikras Eden, ve'ein sham his galus Atik, because there's no his galus. Chachma is not his galus. Chachma remains a barak hamavrik. It remains in a kuda. He says, Ki atik hu mekoyer hatanugim v'atainuk hu l'mayla min hachachma. Really, tainuk is higher than chachma. Okay, and then he continues, v'chachma atzma shehi bechinas nekuda adain loy bali degiloi. Once it's, as long as it's in chachma, it's not tainuk. It's limited to that one little dot. So it says, Ki im al yedei bina. Only once it comes down into bina, nekuda behecholo, nekeva tesevev gever, shemekabeles ha'ara atika. And we were saying before that bina has the ability to obscure chachma, and that koyach comes from atik. V'ha'inyan kenoida sheliyos hispashtos v'yeridas hamadregas udafka al yedei bechina umadrega yosel yena. Like we said, the ability to go down low and to go down into different levels lower than you, that comes from a very powerful place.
Obscure chachma connotates to refute the chachma. I can't see how it's obscuring chachma. I
so
get
refute and obscure is not the same word.
Yeah. Okay.
So sometimes when you're and it's a valid question, but sometimes when you're very deeply engrossed in thinking through an idea, you sometimes forget what the point of the idea was. Like, you're so far away that you're no longer connected to the point of it. And that's what obscure means in this case. Like, if Chachma was more powerful than Bina couldn't do that to Chachma, because it would always shine through. Because the fact that a person can be completely lost in a state of Bina, that comes from a place that is higher than Chachma. It says, Olahavin Zehetev, in Eksiv B'Shloime, like you said earlier, it says by Shloime Vayedaber Shloishes Alav Mashal, the highest, the most, the smartest person that we talk about, Shloime HaMelech, his chachma was that he had the ability to put it into 3,000 different mashalim. Ha'inyan hu k'moshe anu roim she'achacham af she'yedei adav ha'chachma b'atzmai. The people that we look at as these great thinkers and intellectuals, even though they have the ability to think for themselves, af al pikein. They don't have the ability to give it over to other people. He has to go through an entire working process to get to a point where they're able to explain it to someone else. Yeah, and it says the and to a point where you can now use a can of truly to explain a concept in Chassidus. It's like you need to find that essence of the idea that you're trying to explain in something that is theoretically completely removed from what you're trying to say. It says, for that, you need a very big chacham. It says, that has the ability to enclose, to put in the chachma into things that are much lower. It says, Rak Shlomo HaMelech Alav Shalom, V'reiv Binosai, which he was the ultimate man of Bina. He says, he was able to find 3,000 different mashalim. The Hainu Gimel Alaf Madrega Shalamatam Imenu, go down 3,000 levels below himself. He was able to not kill the initial idea. It says, Lachein. We're just going to go till the next paragraph, and that's where we'll end. So just to finish this concept, it says, Lachein, k'shenitzach l'shtalshel hamadrega shetia hizbein is ba'achava tzarich sheyem in meker elyon hagvoya b'yosem bechinas chachma. It has to come from a place that is much higher than chachma. V'oz yochel liyas isgalas bina, and that's when bina can actually be mizgala. Aval min chachma atzma en yochel later the l'shtalsh mimena bechinas bina. Chachma itself would not have the power to do this, because bina has the ability to obscure chachma. So, but chachma cannot be the ultimate source of it. It says, as rak sheirish bina ve'izgalas he izgalas atikba v'al yoda nishtalshin ve'izgala ba'achava. That goes directly the bina's koyach by taking from atik. Afkan liyos ha'ara bina oirich v'roichav, like we mentioned before, that the ha'ara of bina, when it goes oirich and roichav, right? He says, "Me bechinas yud chachma bechinas nekuda chulu Hu al yedei gilui b'china elyona yeser, he b'chinas atik, again, b'chinas koitze shel yud, like we explained before, that comes from that little thing that's sticking out from the yud on the sha'al yedei zeh mispashet hayud behei. It comes from the top koitz and it goes to the bottom koitz, and in between is the chachma thing. And he says, "And we can avoid bepardish ayud yesh lo gimel koitzim, or mikoitz hatachten nimshach hahei, or mikoitz hatachten yesh bechinas hakoitz ha'elyon." It's like there's a connect the two little things they call a thorn. Yeah, a koitz is also, but we're talking about the little thing that's sticking out from the yud. So it said there, those two things are directly connected to each other, and it's like this is how it comes into yud, and this is how it goes out of yud. So really, the yud is just a station, is just a conduit. But really, yeah. It says, "V'nimtza sheyesh ha'aretz koitz ha'elyon b'bina, v'lachein yerida zu hi b'chinas ilui me'oid shenimshach or hakeser." It's like really, obviously, you have to say that in this bina there's something that's not there in chachma that's coming directly from keser. And it says, "V'lachein vayelech lemasav min negev." He says, "Chesed ve'at beis el malchus melamayla lamata." Right, that's the journey of Avram. It says, "Melamata lamayla." Then it affects him back, like his journey downwards, and then the journey affects him back upwards. It says, "Melahavaya nira ad lahavaya sasam." Until here we'll go.
It's very interesting because you said for bina, the functionality of the bina is to go oimik, right? Oimik, rochel. So
yeah,
if you say